G'day YouTube, welcome back to the VK8FOS YouTube channel. The video I am making today is the tutorial that nobody asked for. We are going to be making a bootable USB thumb drive containing DragonOS Linux. So I've noticed a lot of my fans and viewers and stuff like that often use DragonOS Focal X inside a virtual machine. So when you're using Linux inside a virtual machine, you're depriving yourself of high performance computing, and I'll explain why. So I need to make the distinction between bare metal and virtualization. So with virtualization, there is a hypervisor allocating resources to your computer, and because of this, it introduces a performance overhead. So when I say bare metal means, for example, you've installed Linux directly on your computer's internal hard drive, and then when you hit the on switch of your computer, it boots straight into Linux. That means Linux has basically direct access to the resources of the computer, like memory, CPU, input, output, PCIe devices, USB devices, and stuff like that. So there's no performance overhead because the code of the operating system is running directly, natively on your computer's hardware. So when you're using like VMware or Oracle VirtualBox and stuff like that, there's a performance overhead because the hypervisor is sitting between Linux and the computer's hardware, essentially. So, and another reason to not use virtualization, especially in this hobby of RF hacking and software-defined radio, is because of USB pass-through. So because the hypervisor is allocating resources to the virtual machine of Linux, it's sitting between DragonOS and the USB bus. So it introduces problems. So you get poor performance. You get essentially like USB dropouts. Like with GSM decoding, I noticed I had to unplug my SDR and then plug it back in again every time I ran a capturing command to capture 2G radio waves. Stuff like that. You just don't get that when you're running Linux natively on a computer. So what happens if you're not a regular Linux user like myself? Surprisingly, you guys might be surprised to know, I don't use Linux that much. It's basically only for this hobby. If I was to put a ratio on how much I use Linux and Windows, I would say I would use Linux 30% of the time and the remaining 70% would be Windows. You know, both these operating systems have a time and a place. I'm not a Windows hater by any means. I absolutely love Linux, but Windows is great for just doing normal stuff on a computer like gaming and watching YouTube and stuff like that. So I basically only use Linux when I need to do SDR and RF hacking stuff, really. So, and what we do when we're not a regular Linux user is, if we don't want to waste a whole hard drive dedicated to having, or a whole machine perhaps dedicated to running Linux, we just make a bootable USB drive. And that's how I run Linux primarily. Yeah, so I'm not talking about like flashing a live image to a USB stick. I'm talking about actually properly installing a Linux distribution onto a USB and having it boot after you select, just say you press the keyboard shortcut when your computer is posting in the BIOS, and you can actually boot from the BIOS into Linux. That's what I'm talking about, and that's what we're going to do today. So, yeah, okay. And yeah, everybody knows what DragonOS Focal X is, isn't it? It's made by my good friend Aaron from SEMA Executor. It's the one-stop shop for anything RF hacking and software-defined radio. Yeah, Kali's great, and there's a few other like pen testing sort of distributions, but if you're doing like software-defined radio focused RF hacking stuff, should be the only thing you're using. Absolutely. So excellent product made by Aaron, so thanks to him for that. Okay, so we'll talk about hardware requirements now. So we're going to need a couple of things here, guys. So the first thing is we're going to need a USB flash drive. So or thumb drive, whatever the regional dialect, what a USB drive is called in your country. I'll just call them a USB drive. Some people call them thumb drives. You guys know what I'm talking about. You're all smart. I'm using this one here. This one here. It's, yeah, just something that I had laying around. We're going to be allocating 64 gigabytes to Linux itself. And being a 128 gigabyte hard drive, it's probably got 112 all up or something like that. So we're going to be... So after we've flashed the 64 gigabytes to this USB stick, we're going to allocate the remaining space as an NTFS partition. So we can kind of like transfer stuff between Windows and Linux, for example. So yeah, that's really, really cool way to utilize extra space. You only need really 64 gigabytes for Linux, honestly. In my opinion anyway. Perhaps you're a more heavy user, you need more, but that's all I ever use, and it's never been a problem. And the second thing we're going to need is, this is obvious, we're going to need a Windows computer with an internet connection. So I shouldn't have to say that, but for the sake of completeness, we'll say it anyway. So let's talk about software requirements now. Obviously, we're going to need a DragonOS FocalX ISO. And what we're going to do first is we're going to install DragonOS FocalX inside a virtual machine. And then we're going to flash the virtual machine's virtual disk, so to speak, to the flash drive, okay? So we need the ISO first to install DragonOS in our virtual machine. Yeah, I'm using R36, but this method works for basically every single, or perhaps maybe most Linux distributions, of course. Not just DragonOS FocalX. You should be able to use this for anything. You should be able to. I haven't personally tried, guys, so feel free to try and let me know. What's next? So the next thing we're going to need is we're going to need VM Workstation Player. So when you download VMware products, guys, it always asks you to create an account. Even just to download free stuff, you got to have an account. So I absolutely loathe and despise doing that. So I've actually acquired VMware Workstation Player, which is the free version of VMware Workstation. I've downloaded it from the Wayback Machine. So yeah, all the links will be like in the description or pinned comment. So I'm going to do that. And next thing we're going to need is we're going to need QEMU disk image utility. Sorry. And this is going to convert the VMware virtual disk image to a raw format image, and then we can flash that raw image to the USB drive. So yeah, I'll explain everything a bit clearer later on. It'll all make sense later. Next thing we are going to need is Win32 disk imager. So this is what we'll use to write the raw, like the converted virtual disk that's now raw format. We'll be writing the raw image to our flash drive using this application. So, okay, we need to talk about legacy BIOS support. So there's two types of BIOS, right? There's they call it CSM, which is like your old school BIOS, and then there's like UEFI. UEFI has been a thing since like 2010. UEFI replaced BIOS because, like legacy BIOS, because it's more secure. And when you have more security, it means you cannot dual boot Linux. So from the 11th gen Intel CPUs onwards, this tutorial is not going to work on your computer. I've tried and tried and tried on my wife's 11th or 12th gen laptop. It is impossible to dual boot Linux on that thing because Intel has removed the ability for legacy BIOS support, which means you can't basically dual boot anything on a UEFI BIOS. I have seen tutorials that allow to do it, but I haven't tried yet. But I tried for days and days and days to get a bootable Linux USB to work on my wife's 11th or 12th gen laptop. Just did not happen for me, guys. So yeah, you're going to need like sort of an older Intel CPU. I think up to 10th gen works. And also it depends on your motherboard too. I guess your motherboard has to support legacy BIOS as well. But yeah, so if you got AMD CPUs, I do not use AMD. I'm probably going to build an AMD PC as my next big gaming computer, but I'm yet to play around with AMD stuff. As far as I'm aware, I think AMD still supports legacy BIOS to this day. So yeah, you'll just have to double check to see if that setting exists in your BIOS. And if it's blanked out inside the BIOS, or the setting just doesn't exist anywhere, then I guess you just can't follow this tutorial. So, okay. So that's basically all the prerequisites and stuff, I believe. Yeah, so I'm just going to minimize my browser. And I've got a Windows 10 computer here, ready to go. So I've already downloaded all the tools and installed them to save some time. So I'm basically ready to go. But if you guys haven't installed any of these applications like VMware Workstation and Win32 Disk Imager, you guys go ahead and do that. And you'll also have to extract the zip file of QEMU disk image utility. So I've already done all that, so I'm ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch VMware Workstation Player. So this is the free version of VMware Workstation. It's just got all the bare minimum stuff really to run a virtual machine on a computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Player. I'm going to go to File and then New Virtual Machine. I'm going to select I will install the operating system later. Make sure Linux is selected and we need 64-bit. I'm going to press next. I'm going to give it a better name. So I'm just going to call it DragonOS Focal X _ R36. Just so we know exactly which virtual machine is which. So I'm going to press next on that. Now I'm going to write 64 gigabytes for the disk size, and this part's very important. We need to store the virtual disk as a single file. We press next. And I'm going to press finish. And then if it's not done so already, select the newly created virtual machine in the side panel here. I'm going to click Edit Virtual Machine, Settings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to CD/DVD. So that's like the virtual DVD drive. I'm going to select Use ISO Image. I'm going to browse. I'm going to browse to my desktop and into my working directory here where I've located the DragonOS Focal X R36 ISO. I know most of you guys know how to do all this, but maybe some people don't. So this video will also serve as like a how to make a virtual machine tutorial as well. So now I've got my ISO selected. I'm going to press OK. And then that should all be good now. So I'm going to highlight the virtual machine if it's not done so on the side panel already. And I'm going to hit Play Virtual Machine. So now this is going to boot the DragonOS Focal X live system, and then through the live system we can actually install the native DragonOS on the virtual disk of the virtual machine. So I'm going to press enter on that. I know you guys have probably done this 100 times before, but for the sake of completeness, we're going to do the whole thing. So yeah, the reason I choose 64 gigabytes is I've tried to install DragonOS with 32 gigabytes before, and it just never seems to be enough room. Like you'll run out of room pretty quickly, I think. I think 64 gigabytes is the perfect amount. Gives you sort of 20 gigabytes to play with in your home directory and stuff like that. And then if you need to more space, you can always just mount the NTFS second partition on the same hard drive and then use that for storage. So that's typically what I do. Okay, so we've booted into the live image of DragonOS. And we don't really need to do anything here except for double click this icon on the desktop that says install DragonOS for collect. So I'm going to double click that. We're going to execute that. And then this will start the installation wizard. So yeah, typically like most Linux distributions have this live image, so you can just like test to see if it works with your hardware and stuff before you commit to installing it directly on the disk. So this is a fully functional live image, by the way. Aaron's got all of the handy tools that he always includes in all of his DragonOS Focal X editions. So yeah, it's pretty cool. But there's no persistence with this, right? So any changes you make or new apps you install and stuff, they're basically when you restart the computer, they're gone. So that's why we do this and install it natively. So then we've got persistence with the installation. So yeah, we've all done this 100 times before. I don't think I need to talk through this. I always turn this off. And I always typically disconnect the network adapter, so I just know it's not downloading anything from the internet. And yeah, I don't worry about this stuff here. Like the third-party software, I don't do that, so I'll just go next. I'll continue, sorry. Okay, so we're going to make sure that we've got erase disk and install DragonOS is selected. We don't need to touch any of these other settings here. So I'll just hit install now. This is probably going to take a little bit when it finally does start installing. I think there's a few other things we need to do, like region settings and username and password and stuff. But once it starts the installation process, I'll just turn the camera off and the microphone off. And I've actually got a missed call from my mother, so I'm going to give her a call while this is installing. So I just give all my Linux, this is probably not good to tell you guys, but all my Linux distributions is just username. And then I'm going to call I'm going to add a host name. So I can identify which Linux I'm using when I boot it on whatever machine. I'm going to put our password in. And I always select login automatically. So the minute I boot from the USB, it just boots straight into the desktop and it's ready to go. Whoops. No underscores in host names, I should have known. Okay, so that's initiated. And yeah, I'll just probably turn the camera and microphone off and speed it up in post for you guys. So yeah, enjoy the sweet visuals of Linux installing. See you soon, guys. Okay, so that appeared to be successful. Took quite a while, not as longer than I expected actually. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to disconnect. I'm going to prevent the CD drive from turning on at power on. I'm going to click OK. And then we're going to go restart now. And then we're just going to make sure that the... Oh, don't worry about that. I think that's just because I pulled the virtual CD drive out, the ISO. I'm just gonna kill it manually, and then we'll restart it. I just want to make sure that it's actually going to start now after all that. Should be okay. Oh, we just crashed. Oh, I've done this thousands of times in preparation for this video, and of course, when I record the video, it doesn't work. Alright, we're just going to test, finally, to see if the virtual machine installation was successful. And it was. I knew it was going to be. Just make sure 100%. If it gets to the desktop, that's all I need to see. So yeah, DragonOS is built up. It's not built on Ubuntu. It's built on Lubuntu, which is lightweight Ubuntu. Yeah, I'm convinced that that's working. That's good enough for me. Yeah, so I'm just going to shut down that now. We don't need that anymore. So now that we've installed DragonOS Focal X onto the virtual VMware disk, we can now convert the VMware virtual disk to a RAW format, and then the RAW format can get written in RAW format to our USB drive. Okay, so now we need to locate the VMDK file. So that's like the virtual hard disk file that that our virtual machine is using. So in order to find that, we'll just open Workstation Player again. And I'll go to, I think it's, yeah, we'll just click on the side panel. And then we'll go Edit Virtual Machine Settings. Click Hard Drive. And then we've got the working directory of the virtual machine path there. I'll just make sure that's copied. I'll shut that. So we just open up a Windows Explorer window, paste that path into there, and then we can see a file here of 17 gigabytes called DragonOS Focal X R36 VMDK. So we need to actually copy that file. I'll go back to my working directory, and I'm going to paste it inside the QEMU disk image converter utility. So this is going to take a little bit because it's 17 gigabytes. We can close VMware now, I believe. We will not need that for the rest of the tutorial, so I'll just close that. Yeah, I should have prefaced this video saying it was going to be a long one, guys. I knew it was going to be. No beer today. I've got to drive later on this afternoon, so no video recording beer. And it's probably too early anyway. It's not even 1 o'clock here in Australia at the moment, so it wouldn't be very classy of me to be day drinking this early. Okay, now that that's successful, what we need to do now is I need to actually rename this file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it input.vmdk. So next thing we do now is we need to hold the shift key on our keyboard, and we right click in the empty space of our QEMU folder, and then we go open a PowerShell window here. And we need to run the following command in PowerShell. So this is the converter command. So this is going to convert the VMware disk image format to a raw image format file called output.img. So I'm going to hit enter on that. And this is probably going to take 5 or so minutes. So yeah, again, turn the camera and the microphone off, and I'll see you guys shortly in about 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back. That took about 5 or so minutes. So yeah, now inside of our QEMU directory, you can see we have a file that's 67 gigabits called output.img. So 67 will equal, 64 gigabytes or whatever. So that is appeared to have worked as we intended, which is good. Okay, I'm going to go back to my working directory now. And the next utility we are going to now use is Win32 Disk Imager. So this is going to finally write the output.img file to the USB drive. So this part's very important. Make sure you always run this as administrator, because I've noticed if you don't run it as administrator, it just sometimes just stops, like with a half-written USB, and then you've got to start all over again. So yeah, make sure you always run this app as administrator. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to click this little open file icon here. And I am going to browse to my desktop. I'm going to go to DragonOS, my working directory called DragonOS. I'm going to enter the QEMU folder, and I'm going to select the output.img file. And then I'm just going to check and then double check that my target USB drive, which will become the bootable DragonOS Focal X USB, just confirm the drive letter, because if you overwrite any of your other devices, I guarantee you're not going to be very happy. So I always pull out all of my storage devices when I'm playing around with stuff like this, because yeah, losing data is not fun. I'm sure we've all done something silly like that before. So I know for a fact that it's not the C drive, and it's definitely my D drive. So I'm going to ensure that device is selected here. D drive is selected under the device drop-down menu. And yeah, again, this is going to take 35 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and click the write button. And yeah, I've actually got to step out and go and see my wife somewhere. So I am going to turn off the camera and microphone, and then I'm going to see you guys in about 35 minutes. Okay, I'm back. That took way longer than I thought it was going to. Yeah, I don't know. It was plugged into a USB 3 interface, but it definitely wasn't running at USB 3 speeds. I mean, look at this time down here. Obviously, the time's all glitched and everything like that. So yeah, took longer than expected. But anyway, that's okay. So yeah, we're finished with this utility now. So if I just go to my computer, or this PC as it's called, we can see that we have a couple of new disk drives here. So this is the Linux. One of these is probably like the boot partition, and the other one is the actual Linux installation. So obviously, because it's in ext4 Linux file system format, we can't actually browse those, but this is looking good so far. So now we only installed 64 gigabyte partition for Linux, so we've probably got like another, I don't want to do maths live on video, but yeah, we've probably got like, I don't know, 70 gigabytes of spare space that we can, oh sorry, not that much, like 50 gigabytes or whatever of spare space, and we can format that as NTFS, and we can actually read and write in Windows and Linux to that partition. So it's really useful if you want to transfer files between Windows and Linux. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the start menu. I'm going to just write create, and then create and format hard disk partitions. Oh, okay, cool. I can do maths live and video recording. Yeah, 50 gigabytes. I did say 70 first, but I then corrected myself. So yeah, we've got 50.61 gigabytes of spare space remaining on this little thumb drive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to new simple volume, and I'm just going to follow the wizard. call it F drive, just whatever letter appears up in there is fine. I'm going to press next. I'm just going to leave it as NTFS. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it DragonOS Focal X R. What is it? R36. Yeah. And then, yeah, when it's plugged into my computer, I can identify that as, oh yeah, that's my DragonOS USB. So, and yeah, leave everything else the same. I'm going to hit next and hit finish. And there we have it. We now have an NTFS permission, NTFS drive of 50 gigabytes there for like extra storage space or transferring stuff between Windows and Linux. And this will automatically mount in DragonOS too. So you always just have that 50 gigabytes there to do whatever you want with, which is really, really great. Yeah, it's auto mounts NTFS drives DragonOS. It's really, really great. It's no like funky command line magic you have to do. It's all just automatic. So yeah, really, really cool. So, all right, that's all we really need to do for now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys just what it looks like to enable legacy BIOS in this machine's BIOS. Like every BIOS is different, pretty much. You know, some people have EFI, some people have old school BIOS. Like no two BIOSes are the same. So I'm just going to show you what it looks like for me, and then maybe that can help you guys try and find the setting in your computer. So what I'm going to do is, this machine here is a server. So it's actually got an IPMI management, like out-of-band management thing. So I don't really need this anymore. So I'm going to open up Windows 7 virtual machine, because obviously this IPMI is like really old and all the stuff only runs on Windows 7. So I'm just going to log into my out-of-band management of this server, and I'm just going to launch the remote control. So this is I can actually show you guys the BIOS with this IPMI. It's really, really cool. Otherwise, I'd have to get a capture card and all that to just show you guys fooling around in the BIOS. I just can't be bothered doing that. But yeah, this is really, really cool, this thing here. So I'm just going to open the JavaScript KVM. And I'm just going to shut the computer down. Then I'm going to restart it, and then I'm going to go into the BIOS and show you guys how to confirm if legacy CSM, I think it's just called CSM support, which is like legacy BIOS, is enabled in the... Okay, so yep, we've got that shutting down. That's good. Okay, I'm going to launch... I'm going to power on the server remotely. So yeah, Asus server motherboard here. I've also got a laptop that's UEFI, so that's my Intel 8th gen laptop, and it's got an UEFI BIOS, and it's got CSM support. So I've actually got a screenshot of what that looks like too. So if you guys have an Asus laptop, it's probably the same process. So I'm just going to enter the BIOS of my motherboard now. So I've already enabled CSM support, obviously, but yeah, we'll just confirm that it's activated. So again, I have to reiterate while we're waiting for my computer to load, that if you have an Intel CPU, 11th gen and onwards, this is not going to work for you. It's basically impossible to dual boot Linux on a UEFI machine. I personally hate UEFI. I think it's an absolute disaster. So I'm going to go down and enter my BIOS setup here. So yeah, this is really cool. So I'm actually, yeah, this isn't virtualized, guys. This is an actual real machine out in my garden shed over there. And yeah, I can actually like modify the BIOS remotely out of band. So yeah, it's really, really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Advanced tab, and then I'm going to navigate down to where it says CSM configuration, and then I've got CSM support enabled there. So I've already done that. So there's nothing I need to do in here. I'll just show you guys quickly what it looks like if you've got an Asus UEFI BIOS, maybe. This is where the setting is here. So, you know, UEFI looks more pretty than typical BIOS. So, yeah, and I think with some UEFI, I think you can actually modify it in Windows. I don't really know. I don't really have many UEFI machines, but yeah, so that's where that setting is here. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't really need to do too much more in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to escape, and then because I don't need to change any settings, I'm just going to press yes. And then we're going to reset the computer here. And then I'm going to show you guys like how to actually boot the USB. So this is, every computer's different. This is just how this computer works. But yeah, a lot of it's the same principle, you know. It'll probably just be like a shortcut button. A shortcut button, like in this computer, for example, it's F8 to get to the boot menu, but some computers are F7 or F2 or the delete button. You just have to find out what it is specifically. And please be aware that if you modify this setting and change it to legacy CSM, your Windows might not boot anymore. Okay, so that's just another warning that I forgot to say earlier. So yeah, be careful when you're playing around with BIOS settings. I won't be responsible if you break your machine. This is the process that I follow. It's probably not going to work for you because every computer and BIOS is different. So I'm just spamming the F8 key right now. So yeah, it's pretty cool that I can boot from other devices remotely without actually going out to my shed. That's why I love this computer. It's great. This was my main gaming rig until it died. And then I recently, like when I say recently, probably 3 months ago, I fixed it, and now I've got access to my GTX 1080 Ti for like cryptographical communication calculations for like rainbow tables and stuff. So, and yeah, this is the boot menu of my BIOS, and then I'm just going to go down to USB because that's the bootable USB we just constructed. So I'm just simply going to hit enter on that. And then this is the final moment. Did I completely stuff up this 1 hour tutorial maybe? Let's find out. And I didn't. Congratulations, everything worked. So yeah, we've got Linux booting from a bootable USB on my machine. And this isn't the live image. This is the actual real final installation of like a native installation on the hard disk booting from USB right now. So yeah, really, really cool. And yeah, we'll just boot to the desktop, and I'll probably show you that NTFS partition and how all that works. And yeah, might talk about some of the advantages of running on bare metal compared to virtualization as well. So yeah, booting from USB 3, it's like, even though it's USB 3's got a high data rate, it's still not as high a data rate as like a SATA controller. So yeah, it's probably a little bit slower than just running it from like an NVMe drive or like a SATA SSD or something like that. But hey, we're talking about seconds difference here probably. And there we have it. And you can't really see it because of the camera. My webcam's blocking it, but we just had a notification come up in the corner here saying that our NTFS partition has been mounted all automatically. So if I just go to my username folder, we can see here that this is the NTFS partition. So yeah, we can just create folders or create a text document in here. And when we boot back into Windows, we can access all this stuff that we created in Linux. So yeah, that's really, really cool. Well, yeah, that's really it. I don't really have anything else to add to this. Like, I should note that as long as the computer that you want to run your USB stick, a USB Linux installation, has CSM support, this will boot on any computer. It's not just like this computer here. I can put it in my laptop. I can put it in this other machine that I'm recording this video on, and it all just works. So that's the beauty about Linux. It's highly portable, and that's the advantage of having it on a USB stick, portability. So yeah, and then if you're using SDR with your DragonOS Focal X, because it's running on bare metal, it's got direct access to the USB bus, so there's no buggy USB pass-through like there is in virtualization hosts. So yeah, okay, we're going to call it quits for this video. It's getting too long. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. And yeah, have fun with your bare metal bootable DragonOS USB. Thanks guys, catch you later.